It's Sunday, April 11th, 2021. This is 39.6, episode number 176, Marriage or Mortgage. So the two high earners like yourselves. Episode number 176, Marriage or Mortgage. And spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it. Alright, so I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Stacking Benjamins. This is that's like the gold standard, I think, these days. Or they won like best financial podcast for a number of years. Joe Saul-Sehy, awesome guy. Let me be on one of his shows before too. Just awesome person. Anyway, I was listening to some podcast last week and catching up on Stacking Benjamins, and he had the two co-hosts of Marriage or Mortgage. And I had not actually heard about this show. This is on Netflix. It's kind of like a House Hunters, but it's mixed in with a wedding reality show put together. So it's an interesting concept. So you take like a new couple, and they have enough money to get their dream wedding with some help, or their dream house also with a little bit of help. And I guess that for a lot of Americans, when you've saved up enough money, like getting out of like, I don't know, some jobs, and you've been saving for your first handful of years adulting, and now you want to get married and or buy a house. And a lot of people want to kind of do the two things at the same time. And so it may be challenging to do both. Now, I was probably lucky. Actually, no. I know I'm lucky because I married A, my wife, but two, or B, I'm also lucky because we got married while we were just finishing residency, while we were still in training, before we had done our fellowships. So one, we were broke, which is actually, that's actually financially, that was one of the best decisions, was getting married while we were broke. And then also we were just moving from Detroit to Houston, and we were only knowing we were going to be in Houston for a year. So we weren't house shopping. I could have tried to buy a rental property moving back to Houston or down to Houston for fellowship, and then we would have hit the 1-year rule, and could have moved out of it, and it would have worked out logistically. But we were also planning our wedding, and it just we didn't actually we didn't house shop. We just got an apartment, and that was plenty easy enough for us to deal with in terms of that whole move. So we didn't have to worry about doing both things at the same time, which made things a little bit easier. Because on our wedding, we were broke, but we had some money, had some money from our parents too. But if we got married now, we would be spending so much more money on our wedding, easily like 3 to 4 times as much money. So anyhow, a lot of people, I guess, are trying to get married and buy a house at the same time. And so they have this show, and one co-host, who is a realtor or a real estate agent, tries to get them to choose to spend that money on a house. And the other co-host tries to get the couple to spend their money on their wedding. And whichever one they choose, one or the other, that host wins. So it's interesting. But the entire premise from where I come from, if you really want to do both things, then perhaps you budget your way into being able to do both things. You might not get the wedding that you want, or maybe not get the house that you want, or maybe you need to find a way to get more money first. But choosing one or the other and kind of like going all the way one way or the other, I guess that's what makes it interesting. But I don't know how realistic it is. And I mean, this is TV, right? And so a lot of this is totally unrealistic. When we bought our first house in Dallas, we actually there was a call out for house hunters, and so we had actually submitted an application to house hunters for HGTV. And when you do that show, they're not like taking you. So that show, they take you to three different houses, and then they choose one. Well, most people don't go to three houses when they're house shopping, especially if they're like first time home buyers. They're usually going to a lot more than that. Occasionally they're going to just one. They're like, this is the one, and that's it. But most people are going to a lot more than three, but it's television, right? So you have to then to like 21 minutes, you do three houses. Okay. Spoiler, the show is completely fake, because when you apply for that show, you actually have to have already bought your house. So they basically want people who have already bought their house, and then they fly in their realtor person for the show and their crew, and then they record you going to that house that you've already bought, and then they take you to like two other houses. And then you know how they say like fast forward, okay, now you moved into your house. Well, you could have already fast forwarded 6 months later, and you're already in that house. But anyway, when we applied, I don't know what it was, but they had already like filled up everything before we even applied. But we still tried just to see what would happen. Now they take this show like to another level in terms of and trying to sell the clients on these houses. So like the realtor, you know how houses, like when you're selling them, people will stage them to make them more appealing to the buyer. That doesn't happen quite as much now because like the market is super seller's market. You don't need to really stage a house to sell it, but still a lot of houses are staged, and potentially it does increase your selling price. They are doing like reverse staging, where the realtor stages the house for the buyer. Like the buyer tells the realtor, this is what I'm looking for, blah, 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 blah. Then like they go to these houses, and then the realtor like stages the house for that buyer. Like they put in the home gym the way they want the home gym. They set up the bedroom. Like, oh my gosh. Like imagine if that was like actually your home buying experience, where you went to a house and it was already like designed for you. That's pretty cool. And then the wedding, they did the kind of the same thing. Like, you go there, and like they already can kind of have some stuff set up for you, like the way you might want it to be. Now, that's not quite as unrealistic. Like, if you go to a wedding venue where it's kind of an all-inclusive, they can potentially already have things set up so you can, see how it would be for your wedding. But the staging of the houses, that's like another level. Now, what's interesting about the show, and you see this on House Hunters too, these people I watched the first two episodes last night, and the whole first season I think is done. I watched the first two episodes, and these families have these couples have like $25,000, $30,000, and then they're trying to buy a house that's like $400,000. I think the second episode they were going to $450,000. I mean, their down payment, or the money they have available to purchase, is like less than 10% of the house. Like it sounds like that's like all of their money. So yeah, there are some mortgage options out there like FHA loans, but I think FHA loans, and there's a limit to how high they'll go. I don't know exactly what that is. These might be over that limit. But there are still programs where you can get in like 10% down, but it's not like they're physicians. They're not getting physician mortgages. They're getting some sort of a loan, but they're like putting in like less than 10%. And it's Nashville, takes place in Nashville, which is, a fun city. And it's a good real estate market overall in terms of growth, right? Nashville has been doing very well for the past handful of years. And I'm sure this year's, like a lot of the rest of the country, like doing incredibly well. But these people are probably, like most Americans, spreading themselves out really thin financially and buying houses that are like at the peak of what they can qualify for, because they're saying like, oh, qualified for $450,000, and they're buying a $450,000 house. Like, if you're buying a house at the level you're pre-qualified for, that can be pretty scary because you can qualify at a super high amount based on your income. I mean, they look at debt to income ratios of like 40%. Even I think I've heard up to like 42%. Like crazy numbers. Like, who's spending 40% of their money on just their mortgage payment? Like, if you're spending almost half of your gross income, you're easily spending half of your net income. And that's just on your house. Your house, again, is an expense. The same way a wedding is an expense, right? Sure, you can make money on a house, but if you're making money, like these people are buying houses that are basically move-in ready houses. Like, oh, we're going through all this. We just want a house we can move into. Everybody wants a house they can just move into. You're going to pay a premium for that. And so that house, you're not able to like put in any sweat equity into it. You're not able to strategically invest more capital to generate more equity than the capital you're putting in. It's not really like a live and flip situation. Now, sure, the market could appreciate, and the market there has been appreciating. The problem with market appreciation is if the market appreciates, A, you're in general paying more property tax, but B, if you sell to get your equity out, where do you then live? Unless you're moving to like another town or you're downsizing, then you're just basically moving your money from one place to the other. You're not really making money on it. It's just the market has gone up. So it's great if you're downsizing because then you can capture that gain and then buy cheaper, and then you actually get to keep that gain. But if you're just doing like a lateral move, you're just losing out on all the transaction costs. So that's what's really scary is you're watching what I guess is a lot of people, and they think that housing is a good investment, your personal house, which is, and it's like the American dream, and what a lot of people will say, like your house or that rent is, just burning or throwing away money. And that's not true, right? If you're renting an apartment or renting a house, and again, you can rent a house, you don't need to rent an apartment. If you rent a house, then you're getting shelter. Now, they say that in Nashville, especially near downtown, the cost to rent is more than the cost to buy, but they're talking about like the cost of the mortgage payment. Every new homeowner has no clue how much cash and time and effort you're going to put in to the upkeep of the property. Right? When you're used to renting, you don't have to deal with any of those things. Your costs are going to be way above just your principal, interest, property tax, and insurance. Once you take that into consideration, then what do the numbers look like? Especially right now with the market going up so high and so fast, I don't think rents have kept up with the appreciation of sales of single family houses. So it could actually be a great time to rent because you're getting more for your house, for your rent, than you're getting for your buy. And a lot of the benefit of the buying right now, a lot of it is driven by the low interest rates, right? Because that can decrease your payment and help. But you're still buying a house that people are super leveraged on. When somebody's pre-qualified for $450,000, they only have $25,000 in the bank. Now, again, when we bought our first house after being married, we were really broke, and we bought a house way more than $450,000. But it was bought as an investment, literally to become a rental property. And we did the same thing the following year. We were super leveraged, but we did it all strategically. We didn't buy them as homesteads just to pour all of our cash into an expense. Now, then they're like $25,000 on a wedding or $25,000 on your down payment on a house. Oh, and it was funny. There was one couple who were like, yeah, the financially best decision here is definitely to buy the house because we're buying in an up and coming area, and this might be our chance to get in. It'll be a good chance for appreciation. That's true. Like if you're buying in an up and coming area, that is your chance to get market appreciation plus, right? Like the market in like the metro area can go up a certain amount, but if you're buying in the up and coming area, you're getting more than you are getting otherwise. So you're getting a hedge. You're protecting your downside more too, because that area is more forced up. And so if you do a move and you consistently move to the up and coming areas, that's one way to kind of capture that appreciation and actually move on to the next property and still benefit from that appreciation you get each time. It's just that a lot of people don't want to move to the up and coming areas. The farther they get in their careers, the more established, they have more money. They're like, we've already done that. We want to be in an established neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. But one of them, they're like, oh, yeah, definitely. The best decision here financially is to buy the house. And then what do they decide? The wedding. Now, that was a shocker, but frankly, if someone's going to spend like $25,000 or $30,000 on a wedding, that's a lot of money for a lot of people. And your wedding is an important day. It's an expense. Your house and your wedding are an expense. But there's one huge difference between the wedding versus the mortgage. The wedding is a one-time expense. It is one and done. Assuming you pay for the whole thing off, you're not like paying it off on a credit card for years to follow. It is an expense and it is gone. Putting the money on a down payment on a house is not necessarily a better financial decision, which is one of the things that drives me nuts when I watch these shows, because they really think buying the house is the better financial decision. But if you're making yourself house poor, that is a very, very tenuous position to be in, because you're making your entire financial picture very fragile. Like, what if you lose your job, right? Making that mortgage payment can become very difficult. If you're living paycheck to paycheck because your mortgage is 40% of your income, gosh, how are you ever going to get ahead? How are you going to invest so that you can actually build wealth? If all your wealth is just in home equity, that is fantastic if you really plan to sell out and like leave town and go somewhere else and go downsize, right? If you're planning on staying in the area, staying in this nice a place, home equity doesn't really help you. It just is a paper benefit. And then I hear people talking about, oh, look, I have this home equity and I want to renovate my kitchen. Should I take a home equity loan out to renovate my kitchen? If you're broke and there's no other way you can find to pay to renovate your kitchen, and you can only afford it now because you've gotten like $100,000 of appreciation over the past few years, and you went in at like 10% down, you probably are still pretty broke. And just taking on more debt to put into your house that is an expense doesn't really move the needle in terms of your financial wealth and stability. And so part of me would rather just people splurge on the wedding, rent an apartment like the way they've been doing, because a lot of these people, they've been renting and living on a much leaner budget, and it sounds like they've been saving up for the house, and now that they've gotten the house, they're not going to be saving anymore because they have the house, and they're just going to be pouring all their money into keeping up with the house, which is just, I mean, that's a bad decision. That's going to take a long time to fix. And I mean, if you try to back out of this and you sell, I mean, you have to deal with the real estate cost, the transaction cost whenever you sell, and that's easily 6%, few percent for each realtor, and then another few percent in just getting the property ready and the holding costs. Because you could be sitting for a few months, not probably right now, but in general, yeah, you should expect to have to float that property for a few months, and probably put some money back into it to get it sold at least at the price you want it to be. Otherwise, it might just sell lower, and that also is going to be a loss. So I don't know. These shows, like, it can be painful to watch because I'm like watching, you're watching a car accident about to happen. You just kind of keep watching it to find out. And you feel for them. They make this like so emo, right? And that's the other thing. Of course, and this is what real estate agents are good at, is getting people to emotionally connect to a property. They're like, what house, can you see yourself living in? And they, try to attach you to that house. Because once you like attach yourself to it, they can get you, and then you're going forward. And that's what most buyers are. They're buying based on emotion. They're not buying as investors. But the problem is they're clouding their thoughts. Their emotional thoughts are being clouded by this rationale that it's investing, but it's really not investing. If it's really investing, they should be thinking about how it's going to put money into their pocket, what their exit strategy is. And that's like nowhere near. Like when I'm buying a single family house, I'm like, how am I going to make money on this property, even if I'm living in it? It might not make money on it today. How am I going to make money in the future? How am I going to protect my downside? How is it going to build our wealth while also being something we're living in? And again, it is an expense, but I'm going to try to still make money on it strategically. In general, I only like buying single family houses if I know I can rent it out and make money on it as a rental, because then you always have that exit strategy. Like, boom, I could get up a day from now, move and say, hey, it's on the market, it's renting, short-term rental, long-term rental, whatever, and I'm not floating this mortgage, and this thing is putting money back into my pocket, and it's just growing my portfolio of real estate assets. Of the 2 episodes I watched, I got like 0 hint, but that's a typical buyer. They're buying an expense. They're not buying really. They're not buying an investment, even though they think they might be buying an investment. If you're just buying expense, it's probably even worse than buying a car, because cars depreciate and turn to zero. At least houses tend to be more neutral. If you hold on to them, they tend to at least maintain their value overall over the long run. But the amount of time suck, money suck house can be, it can really, really hurt a lot of families. Like people foreclosing on their cars, yeah, that happens. But foreclosing on a house, certainly. Like if you lose your job and you're super over leveraged, it's certainly not surprising that that can happen to people, especially during COVID. Now it's funny because one of the episodes, they chose wedding, and then it was like COVID, and so they couldn't have the wedding they chose to have because of COVID. It would have been interesting because all these episodes, I guess, were probably done last year during COVID, and also before the real estate market was insane. It'd be interesting if they did a second season of what it would be like right now, because like you can't just like walk around, just like check out a bunch of properties and then like negotiate back or ask them to throw in freebies, because they're getting like all these freebies thrown at them. That's very unrealistic. Because yeah, right now it'd be a whole different game. Like if you find a house that's nice, that checks all the boxes, guess what? It's checking the boxes for like a bunch of other people too. And that property hits the market on a Thursday, it's getting offers on Friday, if not Thursday. So you might not be able to go to like 3 different houses that you like to, because by the time you get to the third one, the first one's already off the market. So anyway, that's just the reality of it. But for those who are interested in this, please you should check out an episode. It speaks a lot to American consumerism and the reality of that. In reality, I mean, I wish people would just rein it back in, buy what you can afford. It's okay to rent. Get a wedding that's not going to make you broke. Have a wedding that's important and that has important people in it that you want to be there. And live within your means. I would honestly, though, if you're going to make a financial mistake, I would rather you make the mistake on the wedding than on the house, because the downside of the wedding financially is you lose all that money. The downside of a house can be a lot worse. Like you could go bankrupt on it. On the wedding side, if the marriage doesn't last, however, then, I mean, you could say that money, but the money is lost regardless, right? The money is spent. So that's interesting. And they actually talked about this on Stacking Benjamin's episode about this last week, because whoever it is who is, I think the one who's doing the wedding, I think, okay, I think one of them got married 2 times. I think it was who's the wedding planner. But they talked about the finances of this, so it's a little bit it's interesting. All right, I'm just talking now. Let's see, anybody else in here? If you have any questions, oh look, okay, just my wife. Okay, yeah, the down payment payments were really low, and yes, house poor. Like it's sad to see people that house poor. I hope that their incomes increase and that they keep their expenses the same. But nobody does this. Income goes up, expenses goes up. Income goes up, then they get a new house. Anyhow, all right. Episode number 176. Although I will say, the second episode, we liked that one a lot better than the first one. Family's there, that family, the couple, they're trying to adopt a child, and they actually have some like really good character development. Like you learn to like really like these characters in the second episode. At least I did. You can't really do that much character development in a show like this, but that episode too was it was good. There might have been some tears by people on the couch watching. Okay, that's it for number 176. Until next time, have a good week. And by the way, April 15th is not tax day this year. Everybody gets like a bonus month. So if you're freaking out about getting your tax return in, you got another extra month without filing. This is brought to you by Multifamily Masterclass. Have a good night.